Imagine this, a US federal judge issues a direct court order. Stop all deportation flights immediately. The reason? Migrants are being sent away without due process. No hearings, no lawyers, no rights. Now imagine what happens next. Not only do the planes take off anyway, but when the judge demands answers, the government refuses to respond. They won't say who was deported, they won't explain why his order was ignored. Instead, they claim the details are too dangerous to share. State secrets, they say. It sounds like a movie, but it isn't. This is a real federal case involving hundreds of Venezuelan migrants, secretive deportation flights to El Salvador, and a legal showdown between the Trump administration and Judge James Boasberg, one of the most respected national security judges in the country. At the heart of it all lies a simple question. Can a US president defy a court order and then hide the evidence under the excuse of national security? What happens when a judge demands accountability, but the government responds with silence? And what if, just what if, that silence isn't about protecting secrets at all, but about hiding a mistake? Immigration lawyers began uncovering troubling patterns. These individuals had been detained, placed on planes, and shipped abroad without any hearings, no formal notice, and no chance to appear before a judge. In short, due process was absent, violating one of the most fundamental guarantees under the Fifth Amendment. The case made its way to the Federal District Court in Washington, D.C., where it landed on the desk of Judge James Boasberg, who also serves as the Chief Judge of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. A position that underscores his deep experience in handling classified, high-stakes matters. On March 15th, after reviewing initial evidence, Boasberg issued a sweeping emergency order. All deportations of Venezuelan migrants who have not received due process must stop immediately. Any plane already en route must be turned around. Any planned removals must be suspended until further notice. It was a firm and urgent ruling, one usually reserved for imminent harm or blatant government overreach. But days later, advocacy groups began sounding the alarm again. Deportation flights hadn't stopped. People were still being removed. The court order was being ignored. To make matters worse, the Trump administration released propaganda videos online, proudly showing aircraft transporting migrants to El Salvador, using the footage as political theater during primary season. In response, Judge Boasberg demanded answers. He ordered the Justice Department to provide a full accounting. Who was deported? When did each plane depart and land? Which officials authorized the flights? What were the exact locations? It should have been straightforward. After all, flight crews, ground teams, and foreign authorities all had access to this information. But instead of complying, the administration delivered a shocking response. They invoked the state secrets privilege. The Justice Department claimed the judge was not entitled to any of the requested information because it was too sensitive for national security. That included flight schedules, passenger lists, and destinations. This move stunned legal experts. The same government that publicly posted videos of the deportations was now claiming that the very details it broadcast online were too classified for a federal judge. Worse still, Judge Boasberg isn't just any judge. He holds one of the highest levels of security clearance in the federal judiciary and routinely oversees intelligence-related cases involving national threats. If anyone could be trusted with sensitive material, it was him. Which led many to ask, was this really about national security, or was it about hiding a violation of the Constitution? To understand how extraordinary the Trump administration's legal move was, we need to pause and examine what the state secrets doctrine actually is. Historically, this legal tool was designed to protect the United States from exposing military or intelligence information that could genuinely threaten national security if revealed in court. It's an exceptional mechanism mechanism, one reserved for things like covert spy programs, classified technology, or operations against hostile foreign actors. But what the Department of Justice did in this case raised alarm bells among legal scholars and former prosecutors. Instead of using the doctrine to protect nuclear secrets or counter-terrorism intel, they tried to use it to block the court from seeing basic logistical information, names of deported migrants, timestamps of departing flights, and who authorized the orders. And they weren't trying to shield this from the public. They wanted to shield it from the judge himself. This was a stunning development for several reasons. First, as Glenn Kirshner, a former federal prosecutor, pointed out, there are already legal mechanisms in place for sensitive disclosures. A judge can receive classified information in camera, in private chambers, or ex parte, from one party only. It's a routine safeguard in cases involving surveillance terrorism or espionage. Second, the very same deportation operation had been publicly filmed and released on the Trump administration's own channels as propaganda. Images of migrants being herded into planes, their arrivals in El Salvador broadcasted for political gain. The information was already in the public domain, so why claim it was too secret to share? To observers, the answer was obvious. The administration wasn't protecting the country. They were protecting themselves. Refusing to cooperate, they were now in direct defiance of a federal judge's order. Boasberg, clearly aware of the legal absurdity, signaled that contempt proceedings were now on the table. And that raised the stakes dramatically. If the Justice Department continued stonewalling, its lawyers, some of the highest officers in the federal government, could be fined, sanctioned, or even jailed for obstructing the court. But more than legal consequences, this episode sparked a larger question. If a president can invoke state secrets not to protect the nation, but to cover up constitutional violations, what does that mean for accountability in a democracy? This was no longer just about immigration law. It was about whether a sitting administration could exploit national security tools to shield itself from judicial scrutiny, and whether the courts would allow it. The Trump administration's use of the state secrets doctrine wasn't just a legal maneuver, it was a political statement. In theory, this doctrine exists to protect the nation from harm by keeping sensitive intelligence classified. In practice, however, it became a tool to dodge responsibility. What made this claim especially brazen was the contradiction at its core. The same deportation operations the administration called too sensitive to disclose had already been packaged into public-facing propaganda videos. The footage was edited, narrated, and broadcast online by the government itself. Whatever secrets remained weren't secrets at all. Legal observers quickly recognized the move for what it was, a deflection tactic. Former federal prosecutors pointed out that judges like Boasberg not only hold high-level security clearances, but also routinely handle top-secret material through secure legal channels. If there had been any legitimate concern about national security, the administration could have submitted the information in a closed setting, but it didn't. The logic behind the refusal collapses under a simple analogy. Imagine a company uploads its employee training videos to YouTube, then refuses to share those same clips with a judge, citing corporate confidentiality. That's not protecting secrets, that's protecting itself. This incident exposed something deeper than legal gamesmanship. It revealed a governing mindset that sees oversight as optional and accountability as a threat. In the name of secrecy, it wasn't the country being protected, it was the administration's own interests. As Chief Judge of the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C., and the head of a specialized national security court, Judge Boasberg possesses the full authority to respond when federal orders are not followed. In light of the Justice Department's refusal to provide requested information through established confidential channels, the court now has multiple procedural options to consider. One possibility is the initiation of civil contempt proceedings, typically used to compel compliance. This may involve issuing daily financial penalties until the requested documents are submitted. However, should evidence suggest a deliberate and sustained refusal to honor the court's directive, criminal contempt could come into play. In such cases, individuals may face formal hearings to determine whether legal accountability is warranted. Legal experts emphasize that these measures are not taken lightly, yet in situations where constitutional rights and the authority of the judiciary appear to be openly challenged, courts are empowered to act decisively. Whether through fines or further proceedings, the message is clear. Executive agencies are not exempt from legal oversight, even in matters involving national security. This practice, effectively outsourcing detention, has been sharply criticized by human rights organizations and legal scholars. Unlike formal extradition or repatriation procedures, which are typically grounded in international law, this deal appears to prioritize expediency over rights. Migrants who were never granted a hearing under US law were instead transferred to a foreign penal system with little transparency, limited oversight, and no clear legal justification. A striking example comes from the case of Jose Zaldivar, a construction contractor in Washington, D.C., who lost 4 out of 5 regular crew members overnight. The workers, all of whom had legal immigration documents, stopped showing up out of fear. While they weren't among those deported, the chilling effect of such policies, amplified by high-profile removals to foreign prisons, has caused widespread panic in immigrant communities, blurring the line between undocumented and lawful status. For critics, the deal marks a disturbing shift. Immigration policy not as a tool of rule of law, but as a transactional mechanism, trading people for cash. In doing so, it blurs the line between national enforcement and international displacement, eroding America's credibility as a nation that claims to uphold due process and basic human dignity. The message this sends to migrants, to international partners, and to the judiciary is clear. Expedience will override ethics if it serves political goals. That message may have short-term utility, but it carries long-term costs for the rule of law and America's moral standing in the world. Beyond the legal and moral controversies, the Trump-era deportation campaign is also testing the resilience of the US labor market. According to the American Immigration Council, undocumented immigrants make up an estimated 4.6% of the total US labor force. That figure rises dramatically in key industries. They constitute roughly 14% of construction workers, 7% in hospitality, and 8% in agriculture. These are not peripheral roles. They are structural. In 2024, a report by Standard Chartered estimated that 2/3 of all non-farm wage growth came from undocumented labor. These workers are often the only ones filling roles that native-born Americans have largely avoided, particularly in physically demanding, lower-paid sectors. The threat of mass deportation is not simply a legal or humanitarian issue. It is a looming economic risk. If a large portion of this workforce is removed without a transition plan, the labor market faces immediate consequences: work delays, reduced output, and rising costs. In Florida, Texas, and Georgia, states with some of the largest undocumented labor populations, construction firms report that projects are being postponed or cancelled due to workforce shortages. This shortage has a direct inflationary impact. The US Bureau of Labor Statistics noted that in January, consumer prices rose at 0.4% month over month, higher than economists projected. Labor disruptions, especially in supply-heavy industries like agriculture and food processing, could keep prices elevated for longer, undermining the Federal Reserve's attempts to cool inflation. The disruption is already visible. A Chicago restaurant lost 5 out of 15 staff in a week, despite all of them holding valid work authorization. In Utah, a licensed Venezuelan worker named Eric Sonoya said he and his wife now avoid public spaces altogether out of fear, cutting back on spending and community engagement. When fear, not legality, dictates behavior and critical sectors lose workers overnight, the ripple effects extend far beyond immigration debates. They reach into the housing market, grocery stores, and the wallets of everyday Americans. On the campaign trail, Donald Trump doubled down on his claim that undocumented immigrants were taking American jobs. But as his deportation crackdown intensified, a different picture emerged, one where industries critical to the US economy were left scrambling to fill gaping labor shortages. This contradiction isn't just anecdotal. While the administration promoted an image of protecting American workers, sectors like construction, elder care, agriculture, and hospitality began reporting operational disruptions due to missing employees. Ironically, instead of opening up opportunities for citizens, the absence of undocumented labor has only widened the gap between available jobs and willing workers. In states like Florida, Texas, and Oklahoma, employers struggled to replace workers who left out of fear, even when those workers had valid papers. Some businesses turned to lawyers for emergency compliance advice, while others were forced to cancel projects or reduce hours. The cost wasn't just financial, it was structural. In other words, the immigration policy was marketed as protectionism, but in practice, it destabilized local economies that quietly depended on the very people being removed. The political slogan may have been America First, but the on-the-ground effect was America Unprepared. What began as a campaign promise to take back jobs has now evolved into something far more dangerous, a systemic erosion of legal accountability. The contradiction between economic reality and political messaging isn't just a policy failure, it's exposing a deeper institutional vulnerability. This case is more than a legal standoff between the judiciary and the executive branch. It represents a clear stress test for the foundations of American rule of law. Can government officials ignore court orders, invoke vague claims of national security, and walk away unpunished? More broadly, it's a warning sign for society about the cost of unchecked political power. In a functioning democracy, when the executive branch can defy judicial rulings and treat legal evasion as a political strategy, this is no longer just a courtroom drama. It becomes a crisis of trust, not only in elected leaders, but in the very legal system meant to hold them accountable. If the judiciary fails to act and the public stays silent, this incident won't be a one-off. It will become a template for legalized abuse, justified by national security and sustained by public indifference. This case isn't just about one court order, one doctrine, or one set of deportation flights. It reflects a broader erosion of legal boundaries, of institutional norms, and of the expectation that government must answer to the public it serves. What happens when a branch of government decides it is no longer bound by judicial oversight? What precedent is set when the very laws designed to protect constitutional rights are evaded under the guise of national security, even when evidence suggests otherwise? These aren't hypotheticals anymore. We've seen the Department of Justice refuse basic compliance, watched as deportations continue despite court injunctions, and witnessed state power used not to protect the rule of law, but to dodge it. Even more concerning, we've seen the effects ripple through society. Families fractured, legal residents terrified, and entire industries destabilized by fear. And yet, the administration remains defiant, betting that delay and confusion will outlast accountability. The judiciary has mechanisms to respond. Contempt rulings, show cause orders, even criminal referrals, all are on the table. But those are legal remedies. They do not erase the civic damage already done. This moment demands more than a verdict. It demands a reckoning. Because if constitutional protections can be ignored for one group today, what safeguards the next group tomorrow? If courts are dismissed with impunity, who draws the boundaries of executive power? And if the public shrugs in silence, who will redraw the line?